Welcome, everyone. My name is Hafiz Saleem, and today I have the honor of interviewing the illustrious Dr. Hafiz Saleem. You may have seen his introduction in the previous installment, but today we're just going to expound a bit more on and do a quick run through of what we've shared already and get into that next chapter of his immigrant story. So the setting that we're working with here geographically, we're in late 60s to late 80s and early 90s Pakistan. You mentioned in your introduction that you grew up in what you could call a glorified slum. Help characterize it a bit more. What's the name of this city and what made you feel this way about it?
This is Lahore, Pakistan. Lahore is a city which is a cosmopolitan of everything. It sounds like a city with an old history, 1,000-year-old history. But within that big city, there are pockets of affluence, and then there are pockets of destitution, despair, and struggles. And I come from that pocket, one of the many pockets of the city where people thought that's the whole world, because they probably, many of us, never even traveled beyond a few kilometers beyond, the bounds of that part of the city, not, the entire city. I can tell you that I vividly remember once only in my early life when we went to the main attraction in Lahore at that time was the zoo. So only once in all the memory of that part of early life in my childhood and my boyhood, you can say that. So when I say glorified slum, it wasn't, the shanty towns and, it wasn't, with the corrugated roofs or things like that. It wasn't like that. There were houses, but they were houses with no diagram. There's no plan behind those houses. You come in and it could be either a courtyard. It could come in. It could be your drawing room, or what you call your living room, or it could be just a toilet. You walk through that and you enter into the other parts of the house. That was quite interesting. Now looking back, it's quite an interesting architecture.
But how would you, characterizing it as a slum is I guess over here, at least, quite the indictment for a city. So in the pockets that you experienced, what you mentioned a bit about, this neighborhood marsh where the cows would go, but it would also become like sewage. Do you think that this is a slum created out of, general poverty of the city, or is it a slum created out of malice or indifference?
I think this was more like the gentrification, and these were most probably our neighbors were mostly the migrants from other parts of the country. So they were not native Lahoris. Most of them came from actually KPK. That's why my brother can speak Pashto, because he can speak their language, because he grew up among them. So there were quite a few Pashtun speaking neighbors around us, and they were immigrants right there. They were immigrants, within the country. So, or you can call them displaced people within the country. So they came from other places. They had nothing of their own. So if someone accommodated them in one room or one portion of the house, they built a new house inside that house.
Yeah.
That's why I call it a slum. So you cannot, and then let's say if there is maybe sometime there was a front yard of somebody, but then there was some room, some accommodation required. So they converted that front yard into another house. So you have a house in the middle, you have a house in the front yard, and you have a house in the backyard.
Yeah.
So it was so it came out everywhere. And I don't recall seeing a straight street anywhere. It was all meandering streets from wherever they found a place, they put a house there.
Well, they have this Urdu and generic Pakistani notion of Jugad. These people, despite all obstacles, will solve their problem for themselves. And this layering of different orders of Jugad from different places, some of Lahori, some Pashtun. Yeah. There's a lot going on.
I have a firm belief in the human's capacity to survive under no matter what circumstances.
And it sounds like Lahore is emblematic of that solution.
Emblematic of that. And look at that. People in the war-torn areas, when you look Libya, Iraq, Gaza, you'll find children playing soccer in the middle of the war when the bombs are falling down and raining down everywhere. So they'll wait for the dust to settle, and then they will start their game all over again.
And we'll talk a bit about, the context in which you were raised. So you mentioned you had a strong handle of the Queen's English. I'm sure a lot of this came from like media reading, the events at
It
the
was
time. So
mostly they were about, but by the way, they were all Sean Connery movies, James Bond movies.
yeah.
That's what it gave me a fancy for speaking and understanding English.
So, I mean, just talking a bit about the context in which you grew up, we're talking about 1979, and a lot of this comes in the Western interpretation of Pakistan as well, turmoil, conflict. And I'm curious about how that was perceived through your lens. 1979, we see Zulfikar Bhutto, assassinated, executed. Then Ziaul Haq, the military general, comes in charge. And then, within a decade, now we're coming around to, your conscience, your somewhere in your tweens and teens and early 20s. Now you have Ziaul Haq dying in a plane crash, and then now Benazir Bhutto is in charge. And then she's replaced with Nawaz Sharif. So a lot of this political turmoil is happening while you're in your early youth. And now I get to observe our version of the same thing between domestic turmoil, different presidents and all. So I'm curious how that affected your life. From the outside, we view all of these major events and, political changes of power as heavily disruptive to the residents of Pakistan or to the average resident of Pakistan. Do you find that to influence your day-to-day life in Pakistan at all of these political events?
The canvas of life changed somewhere in the early 70s from being a secular and political sort of semi-democratic society to a religio-political society. I grew up in that part when it was transitioning from all secular to all religious. And you mentioned Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's assassination. His assassination was made palpable. People were able to digest his assassination. Majority of the people were able to take it as it is.
It was like a public execution.
It was not public execution, but it was execution.
Yeah.
But it was, for us, it was given as it is a good thing that happened because this guy was anti-religious, or he was alcoholic. He allowed alcohol, and he was a womanizer, and all of that. So this is how we were told by the authorities at that time. So we thought, he's going, or his being gone from the scene isn't that bad a thing.
And in your youth, did your personal perception, I imagine there must have been a turn at some point, but before then, when you were growing up and you heard this story, did you believe that a secular leader for Pakistan was wrong? Or you would believe that a leader like Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was not right for Pakistan? Were you religiously pilled as some might?
Of course. That's how, and that's the power of propaganda. That's how we grew up. And since that was my boyhood, so at that time I can tell you, yes, it was considered as something sacrilegious, we should immoral and all that.
Improper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this guy comes, Ziaul Haq, he comes in on a religious horse, and he tells us, all right, I'm leading you to the righteous path. And we thought, now we're on the righteous path with this guy, because he would start in every speech, with the Quranic ayats. And I said, that's a good thing. We never heard of that before, because the other guy weren't doing that. So he transformed and then on top of that, because he was a military guy with all sorts of powers bestowed upon him with the help of gunpowder, he was able to instill that religion in the minds of an entire society, to the point, by the way, that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's name was disallowed from all forms of print media and whatever TV at that time. So we didn't even hear his name for the next, I must say, decades. There was not even a name mentioned of the guy who was at one time was the most popular leader of the country.
Yeah.
That's the power of propaganda.
Strong propaganda. All right. So I think we've got a nice macro lens of the environment in which you grew up, political lens. Now, I'll take it back to an earlier mention that we had about like this nature of slum and the Jugad of people like kind of coming out and shaping the city, the streets in which you played around. So high level question, how did you, as someone in your economic standing at the time, growing up, like how did you practice Jugad from your youth even into like your early 20s? This is a very common story in like the Pakistani history that like people are having to play tricks to get by in life, to do the bare minimum in life, to succeed in life, to get ahead. Did you have any tricks or things that we would find as Americans like highly unusual just to get through your daily life?
I have the evidence, if I could bring it to the camera right here. If you look at closer, the skin on this side of my finger, on the left hand, index finger, is different from the other colors. You can see
Oh,
that
I see
slight
that.
difference.
Raised.
This was part of that mindset of a Jugad. And because I wanted to have a projector, I couldn't afford projector. So what I did, I wanted to invent my own projector, and not realizing that a projector needed a certain kind of illuminating device behind it. I put a regular, and by the way, in that part of the world we use 220 volts, which is double the power of 110 volts that we use here in the United States. So I put 220 volts bulb in a socket there, and started while I was inventing or doing my jugaad there, it just shot and blew right in my hand, and this entire skin was blackened like there was a small firecracker, just exploded in my hand. And now I couldn't tell my parents what I'd done. Hid my hand behind my back, saying, "What happened? What happened? We heard this loud noise here. Nothing happened. Nothing happened." And when they saw my finger, this was permanently discolored permanently. So even today, we have the mark of that Jugad system.
Yeah.
It goes on and on. But that Jugad system, like I said, that is a survival mechanism. Everyone did it. You don't have to be smart to do that. So everyone wanted to, within their means, they wanted to have the best of the best. I came from a place, by the way, where we used to have a tooth powder. For the tooth powder, it was called Dentonic, and it didn't make much of a, right now with the making too much of a foam here when you're brushing with a toothpaste. And when I saw some people with a lot of foam while they were brushing, I said, why don't we have that much of foam? Maybe that would make us look cleaner. So I thought maybe they're using soap. I didn't know what a toothpaste is, and then if toothpaste is different because tooth powder was cheaper, toothpaste was very expensive, and I didn't even know that toothpaste is a thing. So one day I just put soap in my mouth and started brushing my teeth. I said, I don't think that is the context of probably that was the first, you can say, trigger. I must migrate from this place.
Yeah. We can come back to that portion of the story, but I mean, for context, for everyone watching, this is one of the most like hygiene conscious folks I know. So this is a massive departure from anything that I know of him. His discovery of toothpaste is never something that I thought I would come into to contact with, that type of story. Okay, so coming back around to something you mentioned in your introduction, a lot of people's motivations when they're immigrating are obscured, or people will tend to believe that it's the obvious one, that America is a land of opportunity. You're coming here, or you're leaving, where you're coming from because there's not enough economic opportunity there. But you mentioned in your introduction that didn't feel like the compelling reason for you to leave at the time, that you were well-to-do, you're employed. What do you find, if not economic pursuit, was the primary motivator for you leaving Pakistan at the age that you did? Which, I mean, if you can remind me, what is that, like 23 or
something about 25?
25.
That was the first time I emigrated from that part of the world to my first destination.
But you had aspired to leave earlier, and those aspirations came from what motivation?
The motivation primarily, like I said, at the age of 17, I was gainfully employed, earning double the amount than my father was making at that time.
And what did he do? Pardon.
I started, working for.
What did he do? Your father?
My father was an employee, with the Pakistan Railways at that time. He was a sub engineer, what they call a foreman, a sub engineer in Pakistan Railways, and he made whatever a government servant would make at that time. And I started with a pharmaceutical company. Right, I remember that I was into the last day of my bachelor's exams, and I was hired the same day, thanks to the again, like I said, that people in that part of the world, they get inspired by someone's vocabulary, and especially English vocabulary. And I had, a relatively better command than many others around me, so I was hired right there and then, and I was offered quite a significant amount. And I said, "Really? I'm making at my age, I'm making double the amount of my dad." So that was just a beginning.
But in spite of that, you wanted to leave.
And because financially it was fine. The social aspects, I was somehow at that age you can say even from that age, I was very forward looking. I always had two things in my mind. First of all, I mentioned in my intro also that there were compelling reasons, the societal pressures, the bullying, and because, you were a nerd and a guy with a different conversational skills and all of that, and people didn't like that. They wanted you to be an average, just like,
Well, in Pakistan they have the notion of like chakri, like you need someone streetwise and slick, and that's a type of intelligence that may have been valued
I was
even today.
academically
Yeah.
intelligent. I was not a street smart. I was never a street smart.
Yeah.
I never made a quick buck.
Yeah. I'm sure you weren't the guy like smoking hookahs after class or skipping class for that
Yeah,
activity.
the only thing I would do, would just eat two parathas instead of one paratha, and naan chole, outside before. Oh, and very interesting. I always skipped the first period in my college in my bachelor's course, because the first period was English, and that had to start early. And before going into stepping into college, I stopped by the cart for naan chole. And by the time I finished my naan chole, the first period would be gone. So for 2 years, I don't think I ever, probably once or twice, I went to that English class. I always skipped that class, and somehow I had to make up for that. So I ended up doing it on my own, and that's how I went to the terminal degree in English literature. But that's besides the point. The point was basically everything that had to do with English language not only distinguished me from the class around, but also made me more vulnerable. I was a target. I was a target for a variety of reasons. For this particular reason, especially, it haunted me not only at college but beyond that. In my early career, even when I emigrated to Dubai, it followed me even there, because even during um, when I moved to Dubai, um, and I remember that we were about I think 14 or 15 people who were hired from Dubai for that financial services company. And we were hired in Pakistan, but we were moved to Dubai. And this gentleman, I don't even remember his name, nasty to the point, because we would always sit in trainings, and somehow I excelled at the training at the financial services company. And he didn't like that why this guy is getting it. So he was from Karachi, I believe.
Mm.
So he confronted me in the hotel where we were living in Dubai, and to the point where he became physical with me.
Okay.
And I was not a strong, brawny lad at that time. Even now, I'm not a strong, brawny lad. But then,
Well, that just wasn't your style of engagement. He used a weapon that you weren't familiar with.
exactly, and I got the short end of that contact. Now I'm talking about when I was already in my 20s. So when I say that this thing haunted me,
Yeah.
it didn't haunt me only in my early childhood.
I mean, before we skip too far ahead, I mean, this is a pivotal moment that I don't want to gloss over, that you took that opportunity, you went to Dubai, and a bit more context, you're the oldest of five children, and it's a big decision, especially in the Pakistani family culture. There's an especial onus on the eldest to be there, to support the family, to be a pillar of support for the family. So what, aside from you said there wasn't much of a social setting available for you in Pakistan, nothing that you cared to stick around for. But family is a difficult thing to leave. And this is the most, I guess, large thing in my mind. Anytime I imagine what it would be like for me at my age to go through this process of emigration, of leaving my home, of leaving my family, it would be exactly that. Like, what made it reasonable, or what made the calculus add up in your head around leaving your family for Dubai? Did they support that move? Did you have to think about what position it would leave your siblings in, or your mother and your father in? What was that part of your decision? Or
Of course,
yeah.
I think being one of the five, there was an inherent advantage that the house won't be empty even when I leave. The consolation was that there will be some financial, you can say, cushion that I would be able to afford for the family. I'll be able to
Like remittance,
send back
yeah,
remittances to the family, and
which is very common, I guess, in the immigration story. Remittances live
exactly.
on to this day.
And I think that will be, you can say, a kind of a payback for my absence. But the advantage for being in Dubai was not that far, from Pakistan. So it's a 3-hour travel from there. Most people, if they can afford, they can travel. even on the weekends. So I was able to keep a contact, not as frequent, but pretty frequent when I was there. So they didn't miss me much. But that was not the destination in my mind. That was a transit. So by that time, I had already exposed, I had exposed myself to the, you can say, the different societies, the different countries around the world. And
Through what mediums? Just TV? PTV, I guess, had been getting big around that.
I was mostly in the newspaper. So it was primarily the English newspaper Dawn at that time. So I was very much into international news, international knowledge, to the point where actually I did an full-fledged certification course in international affairs. So it was a postgraduate diploma course in international affairs.
In Pakistan, you did
Yes, in
this?
Pakistan. So I don't recall if I finished that, but I sat there, and that gave me exposure to the affairs of the world. And I was able to see from that, the slum world to the actual global world. I was able to see the difference. So that alone changed the picture of my destination. Somehow during that period, I met a friend of mine in Pakistan who made me think years beyond where I was at that time. And I would give all the credit to that friend. His name was Shahid.
And you met him in what context?
He was my college mate, but I miss him because he died at a very young age. I think in his 40s, he passed away. But Shahid was so far ahead of the times at that time. He brought that sense of adulthood in me, in my boyhood. I was never experienced boyhood in my life because of him, because he was my main mentor, my main teacher of life. So Shahid would tell me way ahead of, many of the small things in life wouldn't even matter. So he would tell me, think beyond. And you know what I started thinking? I started thinking not of me. I started thinking of my children growing. Even when I wasn't even married, I started thinking of that. All right, if my children grow up, where would they be? Well, what they should accomplish? And all the struggles that I had, they shouldn't have to go through that. Didn't have to go through that, all that bullying and all that I went through. So I would not raise them in Lahore. I would not raise them in that place where they were bullied just the way I was bullied. And I'm talking about, and I think probably that day when I told you about that confrontation in Dubai, I was already 24, 25 at that time.
Yeah.
That was enough for me to say that I have to keep my children in a society which is more
Well, it
secure.
seems like, yeah, you were realizing it wasn't the place, it was some inherent aspect of the culture, or at least in the microcosm of Pakistan that you experienced, that was prohibitive to people of an intellectual persuasion, or people with, curiosities or interesting proclivities or whatever. You feel like someone would be withheld from having an intellectual pursuit because of the social context. Yeah. So, I mean, so is that what thought carried you, or made you believe that Dubai was not your final destination, and had you carrying on to the next place?
Yeah, I think Dubai was, at some point, it became financially untenable because
You've been there for 4 years already. Did it become untenable just there while you were there as a bachelor? Or I know at some point along this journey you were now, married as well.
Yes, and I could tell you in also I can tell you everything has a purpose, everything has a cause, every effect has a cause. So that effect of marrying somebody, the cause for that became a pill. I always owe that to a pill, and not that kind of pill.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this. I'm talking about metformin, the sugar pill.
South Asians most critical.
Exactly, metformin. And my father-in-law, he was diabetic, and since I was in pharmaceutical company at that time, and we used to sell a lot of metformin, so I was often I would give him a gift of metformin. Exactly, and he said,
It's like
so this is a good guy. He takes care of my health, and I would, he thought this, and that we come from a culture of arranged marriages, so he thought this will be a good match for my daughter. Because he takes care of me, so he'll be take care of. I'll be able to take care of her too. So I always credit metformin to my marrying your mom.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
You never probably that's
How romantic,
yeah. So
that's beautiful. People use a lot of different pills to fall in love these days, not metformin.
So this was the beginning. And when you talk about the The financial, you can say, financially became untenable. It was gradual. It wasn't instant. But I knew this: the financial services were not in style at that time in the Middle East.
And this is like early 90s.
We are talking about exactly. We are talking about 94, 95, something around that. Yeah. So we have this. I started, and since I had a plenty of experience in pharmaceuticals. So Johnson and Johnson hired me from Dubai. It's the same company I was working with before in Pakistan, Johnson and Johnson. So they hired me from Dubai and posted me in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah at that time. And probably that's why you were born.
Okay, so interesting pivot point. Just to summarize real quick. So you are now up until 25, you were in Pakistan. Then, between 25 and 29, you're in Dubai. And now, late 29, 30s, you're in Saudi Arabia. By this time, you've also already had one son. How did that impact the way you thought about moving around? Because now it's not just you. Over here, there's a lot of thinking that like, oh, once you have a family, you need to be settled. There needs to be permanence. Children thrive in environments of permanence. So now that you have one son already, by the time I guess you're 28, 27, 28, maybe even 29, somewhere around that time, you have a son. Is this notion influencing how you think about where you stay, or are you still pretty career oriented? Like what is driving where you choose to live right now? Because over here, or for non-immigrants, it is one of the biggest decisions they make in their life, like where I'm going to stay next. But for you, it seems like you're hopping from Pakistan to Dubai, from Dubai to Saudi Arabia. When did you start feeling like you should start thinking about permanence, or did that not come into your...
No, absolutely. As soon as we had our first child, and since this was a family, there was a prospect of family-based immigration to the United States. But financially, the reason that I moved out of Dubai for the financial reasons were easily taken care of in Saudi Arabia. There was financially, we were all set with Johnson Johnson. There was a point, like I mentioned, I was a nerd. I was bookish. The education in Saudi Arabia at that time was, how should I say, very theological. It was limited to, I remember,
Islamic studies.
Children in high school were reading, out of 9 subjects, there were 7 subjects on Sharia, one aspect or the other aspect on different kinds of Sharia, and only 2, I think probably one must be in math, I believe, and one could be maybe science or history, something like that.
But these are, so I'm just thinking at the time, there was a lot of investment in the Middle East. I know myself that I had one of my coworkers, his parents were working in Saudi Arabia at that time. So were there enclaves created for the immigrants that had different social standards or different social positions or environments so that they could study what they wanted? Yeah.
Only at the elementary level. The kids, by the way, at that time, the immigration laws in Saudi Arabia didn't allow kids to go to a college. So the kids of colleges had to leave the country. So elementary, yes, they call it international schools. There are international elementary schools there. But as soon as you go beyond it and elementary, then it starts getting murky. Then you have to go to some Saudi school. Saudis would not allow foreigners. So they were more like Arabic schools. So I would not, and we're talking about at least 25, 30 years ago. So we at least 25, 26, 27 years ago. So whatever openings that you see now in Saudi Arabia were not there before. These American universities and all of that, they didn't exist then. So they were all Saudi universities and Saudis and all of that, and all Arabic heavy, Sharia heavy. So there was no such thing as raising. It was impossible for me to even think of raising my children beyond kindergarten.
But this brings me back to a point. Now, we talked earlier about the political context in Pakistan. We talked about Zia-ul-Haq and his influence on, your upbringing, or, his influence on Pakistan and how that reflected in your upbringing. I know for a fact that you were a scholar of the Quran, that, did the hifz, which is, it's a memorization of the full scripture, and to be able to do a recitation of it is an exit criteria. Given that this was your religious background, it seems like there was an inflection point somewhere along here where you thought, now not, if not full abandonment of religion, there's this idea that it should not be the whole of one's education. There's an idea that like it shouldn't be consuming you, or you didn't want it to consume your children. You didn't want your children to be in that immersive of a religious environment. Do you think that, what do you think was a tipping point for you to think that, this religious mindset is not the end all be all? Or was it like that from the beginning, that you thought that these two should run in parallel, both a religious education and a traditional
I think
Western
it
education?
was a proclivity to the mindset of logic that I saw a discrepancy between what makes sense and what doesn't. Started
Happened when you
happening in
started.
Pakistan because I can tell you, I believe there were about 22 people when I was in madrasa for Hifz, and there were about 22, you can say, classmates or cohort mates at that time. Out of those, there are only two who made some place in their lives. 90% of them didn't make any place for themselves in their lives. They're dependent on others. That alone shows there is something inherently missing in the wholesome approach in raising a human being in that education. And I would not call that education. As you rightly said, it was memorization. It was rote. I don't know what we weren't told the meaning of that.
Told to understand it. If I recall, sometimes you're told that trying to understand it is already a transgression of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
you
questioning
were
it.
supposed to just listen to what someone else is telling you and stop there. So don't ask questions. You ask questions, then you're getting into the realm of transgression.
A rap on the wrist or a twist
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
heat.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
move beyond that. So that was absolutely beyond question that I will be raising my children with that kind of submission in in any way, way, shape, or form. That's why when people tell me, including your mom, is tell me you got strong-headed children. I love it. That's how it's supposed to be. Strong-headed children. That doesn't mean disrespectful children. Strong-headed only means that they have able to raise an argument. They're able to think logically. It's not only with me, their argument is temporary, but in their lives, that is a skill they need to have. For others, that might, sometimes, might come across as a disrespect or as an affront to parents, because the cultural thing, yes, we were never allowed to ask or question the wisdom of our parents, but we allow our children to question our wisdom. And at the end, you can do all of that within the bounds of respect and culture and tehzeeb and all of that. But beyond that, I would never want my children to be yes people for everything, not only with me, but for the world. This is what, otherwise people will be walking over them.
That's really.
And that's why I wanted them to, and because since it was a family-based immigration to the United States, so it was already something that was in plan. I had one very specific target. Like I told you, financially I was fine, and I knew when I'm coming to United States, I'll be throwing myself into uncertainty, and that's what I did. But I thought I would raise my oldest child in a society where education matters in the first grade. That was a target. So kindergarten he did in Saudi Arabia, but as soon as he would touch first grade, we would move to the United States.
Yeah.
That's why we moved to the United States in 1998 or whatever it was, 2000, somewhere around that time. And he went to first year over here.
Yeah.
That's when you went to kindergarten over here.
Yeah.
Because he had to go to formal education, first grade in the United States.
Yeah, makes sense. So, one interesting takeaway that I'm getting is that you're now in your maybe late 20s, and you're learning this. You're undergoing this really difficult journey of learning how to be a parent against the backdrop of also learning a new culture, learning a new place, trying to make a way for yourself across now 4 different countries. I'm sure there was some other travel peppered around in there as well. So, do you feel that it was difficult? Did you find yourself with this self-doubt at that age that, like, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? It is already it is incurring a lot of risk individually to go move from one country to another. Now you're incurring that risk across your wife and 2 children. Were you ever uncertain, or were you constantly battling uncertainty? Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to be able to, is this a one-way door or a two-way door? Are we walking from a reasonable situation to one of potential destitution? I have this aspiration to offer my child a Western and open education, but is that going to backfire on me in other ways? I'm curious, the way that you're telling this story, I'm hearing a lot of conviction and confidence in the way that you went about it. But with me in my late 20s, I feel like it's riddled and mired with a lot of self doubt in every single decision I make. And sometimes I just have to go pursue and execute the decision, even with all that doubt in my mind. So I'm trying to get a bit of the emotional
I
perspective here.
think
Like,
it,
did
it
you have this level of doubt, or was it mostly just blind conviction and that doubt didn't come until later?
I think the people who confronted me, who bullied me throughout, they gave me the confidence, man,
Ah,
I am good.
they
That's why,
say that.
they don't like me.
In America, they say they hate you because they hate you, or they say haters are my motivators, and it sounds really like the kind of opportunity to put them in their place gave you a lot of drive to execute on all of these
And
different.
I can tell, yes, I knew that if these people hate me, and then there were some people whom I admired and they liked me. The people I admired, they liked me. So when I am admiring somebody for certain accomplishments or skills, whatever it is, and they like me, and to the point that some of them actually came to shield me. And I'm talking about, Dr. Shauki Channa, the guy who hired me for Dubai, and he was one of those phenomenal storyteller and accomplished in so many sense, leadership trainings and all that. This guy was not only an inspiration, but he was also a protector. So that gave me so much of uber confidence
Yeah.
that I just, like sometimes you say, I knew I would never be unemployed. I will always be welcome no matter where I go. I will find a job. I'll find a place for myself.
So that's really impressive, namely because I mean now in the modern day, in the context in which I grew up, I'm able to have a level of confidence in a lot of decisions solely by being able to do the research or look at somebody else's template. Everything is so well socialized. I can say, oh, this job is guaranteed to yield this much money, or this move will yield this outcome. But we're talking early 2000s, internet not super widespread, definitely not as much content on it. So, like, you had no template, you had no proof. It sounds like, I mean, aside from this mentor, you weren't bouncing ideas on the move with anyone outside of your wife. So, yeah, it truly is impressive to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people that you're able to make these transformational decisions without having several templates of success to model it after. It's pure, almost manifest destiny. Like
Like
I belong over there.
I believe that in every you can say phase of progress, in every phase of one person's life, people depend. This kind of confidence comes on exclusivity. Somebody could have a lot of financial assets, and their confidence comes from that. This is my asset. So, like you said, sometimes you say, I have a 6 months of or 2 year of
Emergency fund.
emergency funds available. I
Yeah.
can take care of that. And some people have certain skills. I had that fully command of the language.
It's true.
That was
Yeah.
my asset at that time. And I knew that, like someone, would joke, I have somebody who is a phenomenal chess player. He can play Mr. T.
Yeah.
He can play, multiple people chess simultaneously. And he would joke sometimes, and he's a math guy. He's a math genius of some sort. He would say, Saleem, with all my math, I can't do what you can. You can BS yourself out of any situation with your English.
Well, it's a really powerful skill for sure.
So he would say that I can do all that with my math, but with your English, you can BS yourself out of any situation.
I agree. I mean, especially as an immigrant, I think a lot of immigrants that come here, they have this language barrier holding them back, and it results in all types of issues between social acceptance, jobs. I feel like you never had that barrier, and that I can definitely see how that would feel like a superpower, like amongst all the immigrants. And the US in late 90s, early 2000s, this is naturally already people are unused to immigration. It's not happening at the scale that it's happening at today, where it's almost commonplace. So I'm sure you're facing some friction already. Then soon after that, you're settled in New Jersey and 9/11 happens. So naturally, people look at you, look at your skin color, look at your name, and come to a lot of conclusions, but they're in a state of conflict because at the same time as you have all of these physical features about you and your name, you're speaking, you came to the US and how you felt empowered by your command of the English language. And naturally, you come here and some folks will look at your skin color and find the dissonance between your skin color and the way you speak. And I can imagine that that played a role in how you weathered 9/11. I mean, you come here in 2000, and the next year, this calamity happens right in our backyard. Where in New Jersey, this happens in New York. Tons of commuters out of New Jersey are impacted by this directly. How did you weather that portion of your immigrant experience? Did it have an impact? You were already in the workforce. Did it have an impact on how you conducted yourself here?
This is the true, real immigrant story. So we come here around 2000, 2001 comes. In November of 2001, 9/11 happens.
September.
Yeah, September of, mm, and yeah, September of 2001, 9/11 happens. We, by that time, within the first year, we had already bought a small house of our own. And right next door, here was an uber racist white guy living by himself. And probably he was waiting for something like this to happen so that he could take his venom out. So right next door, he's a neighbor. You can't move away from him. And what he does, he starts throwing all sorts of nasty invectives and middle fingers and curses and yellings and shoutings.
And this is now in my recollection as well. I'm a thinking, breathing age, and so is my older brother. And this is our next door neighbor. Will walk by and he's saying stuff like camel jockeys or really, really intense stuff.
And I didn't know.
I didn't know what was going on.
And I didn't even know what that word is. I thought he was saying sand diggers. So that's exactly because then we were asked to go to the court at that time and file a case against him. And even at the court, I said, this gentleman is saying all sorts of things, and I don't know what sand digger is. So then the prosecutor, he knew that he actually was saying sand nigger, not sand digger. And he was saying it to my little children who were playing in our own front yard. And he would paste nude pictures on our side of the house in his window just to kind of provoke us or because they know this is a family. And he was living all by himself. So he would rev up, his motorcycle, full speed, and just standing there, he would just rev the engine just to scare us and all of that. That was the kind of America that we came to. And this is not, what it was the original plan to come to this kind of America. And we thought, we already started off our the American dream, and we have the house, the children are going to a good school and all that.
And is this the only instance? I mean, now you're in a workplace. Are your colleagues, whispering in this way, or
No,
most of
I
them are
think,
providing their condolences? Are they acting as though you're a representative of these people?
Majority of the people at workplace, even in the neighborhood, nice, supportive people. But these are the few instances. So it's not the American society at large. American society, in fact, American system of justice also protected us.
Yeah.
So they put that guy on a probation for 6 months because I said, I don't want anything to happen to him. Just tell him don't do it and we'll let it go. The law actually allowed for a full-fledged punishment. Since I wasn't in the pursuit of punishment for him, so they let him go on a 6 months of probation of some kind. He continued even, I think he was some kind of cuckoo to the point where he didn't care. So I think he continued doing whatever he had, whatever he was doing, even after he was put on probation.
Yeah. And we moved, I'm sure within a year, I remember we had moved to
and I didn't want to take that because we were in the process of setting our life up in a new country, so I didn't want to put too much of my cognitive resources thinking about him. So I said, all right, let's get out of here. So we sold that house and moved to someplace else. But during that time, some interesting things did happen. Like I was teaching in Pakistan, so I started teaching English here.
And actually, before we dive in, I feel like commonly today, at least as I work in the tech industry, and the visa question is always front of mind for people. And I'm a bit curious how that worked out back then. You were not an American citizen upon landing here. So how did you secure a job back then? Was it much less difficult than you hear about today? Or was there something else already in process that enabled this to be pretty easy breezy for you?
No, I think I came, with $10,000 in my pocket. That's all I had, and the rest was just my ability to find a job within my skill set, and job I did find, and I did find a job in teaching. And I came on a family-based immigrant visa,
Yeah.
so I was allowed to find a job anywhere I could. And I think I'd seen enough of uncertainty of corporate structure in Pakistan, being in highly competitive pharmaceutical sector, and in the financial services company, and in pharmaceutical company in Saudi Arabia. It was highly competitive, all money driven, target driven, highly stressful jobs. Money was there, but so was the stress. I thought, all right, I have another skill set. That's teaching English. So I started teaching English, and I was got the job right away. And again, this was very interesting. I was hired at a salary higher than the local American teacher who was teaching right next to me. And the first school, I started teaching Jersey City here. A couple of interesting things did happen, and I do want to actually to talk about two. That's what shows the cultural adaptation, how difficult it was. I started teaching at a high school, and I didn't know that there is a vocabulary difference also. So I was marking some student essays or something like that, and I asked a student, "Hand me that rubber," and they started laughing. Then I realized that they call eraser. So with that, over the next several years, I had to overcome a lot of cultural and linguistic faux pas in the new society that I was in. Many times, unwittingly, I'll be offending people without knowing that this will be more like a matter of interpretation of what I was saying, not my intention. But there was a difference between intention and interpretation. For example, one of my bosses, a vice principal, she came back after a long medical leave. And when she came back, she was pretty thin. She'd lost a lot of weight. So in my preset vocabulary, I was admiring her in a way. I said, "You look very smart."
Yeah, yeah.
And
Classic.
the culture where I came from, being smart means thin and slim. And it was actually in an office, and there were a couple of other people also around her. And they all started looking at me like, what, she looked dumb before?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, yeah. I mean, this is a pretty famous shared immigrant experience, right? Culture shock. This is what you're going through, and this is at your first job here. Seems like you know unwittingly or unknowingly picked up a bunch of lessons here, and now you had a career progression beyond this. So where did that take you next? Did you feel like culture shock was something that you sat down and focused and overcame at once, or you've been chipping away at this for years?
I think, that's why everyone's immigrant story is unique. I was in an education circle. People were more by their training, they were more by default, they were trained to be welcoming of the diversity, which is now another a misnomer here. We should not be using diversity anymore. But diversity that was the mantra, and that was also an initiative at the state level, at the federal level, and people were very welcoming. I was generally very welcome in the positions I came to, and aside from a short span of time, where I tried to pay my bills, I opened up even a toy cart in one of the malls here, and I spent some time running that. Didn't go anywhere. In fact, and that is one of the lessons that probably people can learn from my experience. I I thought, all right, I can make money from this business. People are sitting here with their uh, with their carts in the middle of the shopping malls, and they have been here for some time, so probably they are making some money, so I can do that too. I had not started teaching at that time, so I ended up, making a contract for 5 years. That set me back a significant amount of money. I'm talking about $60,000 in just a span of 5 months, because the rent was about $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
So you imagine a couple of months, and I realized, man, I'm not making even $600 a month, and here I have to pay $6,000 rent every month, and that set me back. So that that's setting back. Once you sign a contract, this is the society of law. You and that is also a problem with most immigrants. There's no guidance. So I was driven by my own instinct. I was driven by my own whatever guidance.
And that's part of, I guess, even the Pakistani upbringing, that like entrepreneurship is celebrated. I'm sure that was part of your thought process when you started this business, that like this is what people do when they come to the US, they start a business. Very rarely are you hearing about people, coming to the US and immediately diving into a job. One, because that's hard. The immigration process doesn't enable that pipeline very well. Um, but two, it's just baked into the culture that like I think the goal for a lot of people is to like develop a passive income stream and then settle down and then, enjoy the fruits of their initial short burst of labor. Is that a, I guess, pattern that you were trying to mimic at the time, or was this like an individual ambition after just walking through the mall and seeing
Yeah,
these
I
other
think it
stores?
was individual ambition more than anything else because I had to get onto something. I had to, find some income on a regular basis, and this came up as something the mall administration, the Simon Mall, the crooks of in this country. They were eager to give me all right. Here's your card or whatever, small shop. Go ahead and set it up, and and they will show you all sorts of. I would not say bogus data, but all right, you see, there are you go to the mall,
You
you see,
see
yeah,
people,
there are a lot of people here. All right, so there will be some business, but there was little to no business at all. I would not blame that somebody tried to shortchange me or somebody tried to trick me into this. That was their job to sell their property, and I would have had the guidance. I did not have anybody to guide me, and I'm pretty sure there are so many immigrants who come to this country and they have no guidance.
yeah.
And
And I mean, you're talking about like your early 30s, I'm sure, or mid 30s. This is, now you, after a lot of exposure, after, I mean, this is even before the proliferation of, lots of websites on the internet, guides on how to do business. Without all of that information available to you, you're pretty much flying blind. Now we can reflect and say, oh, perhaps personal computing revolution comes along, iPods are coming out. We shouldn't stake all of our business in this thing that might not be engaging to the usual consumer
more than
anymore.
anything else,
Pivot.
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon.
Amazon killed all these malls.
Yeah.
And I was right there. And that was also the beginning of Amazon. Amazon was taking over. Um, so I lost uh, my enthusiasm for that business within the first 3 4 months, and I wanted the security, which I believe most immigrants would want some sort of a security. If you have a family, you have to pay the bills, you have to pay the rent, and all of that. So I immediately I immediately started looking for jobs, and here comes an interview, and I went back. I had two experiences. Either I go in marketing in the pharmaceutical industry, or I go for teaching
Yeah.
English. Teaching English came so quick, and because I already had an advanced degree from overseas, it was converted into a teaching certificate from the state of New Jersey, and I was employed in a public school district as an English teacher for a high school. Phenomenal experience with the people over there. And I knew that my accent was different. I did not speak in American English. My accent was a combination of British and South Asian accent. But the people were so welcoming. That is what you not find everywhere. I think probably that is in certain industries where there's a lot of diversity. There were people of all backgrounds, but I was the only. At one point, probably I was the only English teacher in the state of New Jersey at that time. Um, but even then, the people around me, they do not make me feel that I'm an outsider.
Pardon, you were the only like, immigrant English teacher in New
Yes, I
Jersey?
was the
Yeah.
only immigrant from India or Pakistan
Wow.
combined. I was the only South Asian teacher of English in the state of New Jersey at that time. Now there are plenty, and it's growing. Especially, you'll find a lot many. And in fact, people. There were even then there were many teachers in mathematics and science, and people who would see me for the first time. They always think, "Oh, must be a math teacher."
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't do my 2 plus 2 proper. But then they found out, all right, there's a teacher of English, and oh, really?
And is this now you're saying you benefited a lot from this professional community that you were forming? Would you say this is like the first social community that you were a member of in the US? Because entrepreneurship, that's a very individual pursuit. Is this exposure to the teachers you worked with, the administrators you worked with, the first time you built any type of community at all, or were you already sowing, relationships socially and familiar relationships, and this is just another one in addition?
I think it's very natural for most immigrants, and that is also, I believe, where they get stuck. They try to gravitate towards their own community from back home.
Yeah.
They try to gravitate towards them. They try to live with them. They try to mingle with them, whether it's through their mosques or churches or whatever. And I was more into my host community. So I was able to, be friends with my host community. These were the Americans, the white Americans, and we were friends. We used to hang out together in our free periods during the day, and we'll have even we started going out with each other families, and but that was I think that was the best thing that I was exposed to in terms of assimilating into the new community. That not only brought uh, their reservations about the immigrants down, it also exposed me to them. These are just like me. These are a human being. They're like me. I started liking them. So all those reservations and reluctances about not mingling went away. But if I had stuck to my own community, I'm pretty sure I would have had all these biases that people carry, even when they immigrate for a variety of reasons, but they still carry their old biases. I think I was able to do away with my biases and my preconceived notions about my host community pretty soon.
Yeah, and I mean, perhaps that's just a treat of the Northeast because this is a common landing pad for immigrants, especially South Asian immigrants. Now we've seen like a couple more communities form around the U.S. with significant South Asian density, but at the time, I feel like our presence here in the Northeast and in general, there was this aspiration that if you're concerned that you're not going to be welcomed by the host community as a people, one of the best things you can do is work with them directly. Be working in the office in your local municipality, show them that these, specters of peril that are associated with immigrants and aliens are largely made up when you're face to face with one that's in your community.
And like you said, I think this is probably only in those geographical locations where there's where there's diversity, where more people they see from different colors of different cultures, and people usually become familiar with their practices, with their lives, and they realize, man, there's not much of a difference. But one of the biggest, I would say, triggers for hate and biases towards other people comes from ignorance of not even being exposed of being familiar with them. But once you become familiar with them, you meet with them, it becomes much easier to accept them and get accepted.
Yeah.
That's why when the people say maybe in the Middle Americas or in the South America, the South of United States of America, people are more self-centered, or they're more self absorbed towards their own communities, and it's because
It's like isolationist societies almost, like
exactly.
they have their echo chamber.
So we have to I would say that we have to find ways to mingle with them in order to bring those walls of separation down.
Mhm.
And luckily, I was in a business where we were able to bring those walls down. That's why this is our home.
Yeah.
This is if you want also the natural patriotism towards the land. This is a home now.
Yeah.
Especially where we get our food from, where we raise our children. That is our home.
Well, since you bring this up, I mean, you're talking about your journey assimilating into American culture and dealing with culture shock, but at the same time, you're a young parent with, growing children going through school. Was it a thought in your mind that like, oh, perhaps, I mean, what are the thoughts running in your mind? Some that might come to mind are, are my kids getting detached from their origination culture? Do I care about that? Is that important to me? Would I prefer that they lean in towards assimilation? What is your priority as a parent in this time beyond just like make enough money to keep us alive?
No, I think I come from a firm belief in culture and values. And in both cases, I think, it is very much possible to expose your children and your family to multiple cultures and to raise them in the values of multiple cultures. And then once they grow up, they can decide to enjoy the best of both cultures. It's not a zero-sum game that you must leave one to adopt the other. No, you can adopt the best of both cultures and enjoy both. Hey, who doesn't like holiday? How about enjoying Diwali and Holi and Christmas and Eid? We are lucky enough to enjoy all of them.
Yeah.
Or you can enjoy just one. So which one would you like? More holidays or fewer holidays?
Well, I mean, for Islam in particular, there's this notion of like, purity and devotion that at least culturally is pervaded very strongly, where like engaging in festivities is considered, heresy. And I guess that's something that, me having this conversation with you, that was something that I experienced, that like I'm trying to maintain some touch with my origination culture and experience the best of American culture. But when you lean too far one way, the other starts barking, saying, I think you're headed the wrong path. You're doing the wrong thing. Why don't you be more like this? And this is a message that I had to navigate growing up quite a bit.
I think the difference is that people sometimes confuse social culture with religious culture. So when we talk about religious culture, yes, then there are strict walls, strict limitations. Believing that religion and religious beliefs is something very private, personal. But exposing my children to the social cultures, naturally, we're not asking to adopt Christianity or become a Hindu or become whatever. You can keep your personal belief of whatever religion you were raised in, or even if you can evolve out of one religion and think of something else. That's evolution, but that comes with time. That's why I always wanted my children to be informed and curious, so that yes, they were raised in a religious culture and social culture of one culture early age, but I think it was a very natural evolution that as they grew up, we started exposing them to other cultures, even taking them to churches, for naturally, not for any kind of a religious service or anything like that, but to expose them to their practices, to their ritual,
so that we can develop a respect for them the way that perhaps we might request that they do for us.
Exactly. So I think people confuse religious culture with social culture. So, and religion is something which is yes, at an early age, it is in every religion. This is in some form of it's indoctrination.
Yeah.
Because you expose your child to a certain practice, certain rituals, certain food, and all of that. And most of the time it's originated from religion, especially where we come from. But then, luckily, because we are in a society where it's okay to accept others, and you go out to school, you have your classmates from all colors and of all religions. So when you sit with them, then you find your commonalities with them and you enjoy that.
Yeah.
And if there are differences, you start respecting that because they are respecting your differences also. So it becomes very natural that you start respecting the differences. And I believe that is the beauty that you'll not find in many cultures. Maybe seen in some parts of Europe where there is diversity, there is a respect for differences. But where we come from, unfortunately, there's not much respect for differences. So we are very fortunate to be here.
Yeah. I mean, all the same, there's a lot of value in maintaining your host culture, or I guess your origin culture's tenets. I remember, growing up here, being put in a Quran class, and I think I was raised with Islamic moral framework and discipline framework, and that has paid a lot of dividends because without religion, at school, it's kind of through experimentation that you're figuring out what's right and wrong. Whereas with religion, you're denied the ability to experiment, but you're told what I believe to be are pretty reasonable tenets around humility, around, giving to others, around protecting those that are vulnerable. These are all tenets that are espoused by Islam, and it informs a lot of how I, live my life today. And what I mean to say is that, like, despite having assimilation available to me, I was, I guess, I had the luxury of developing a moral and disciplinary framework based off of, religious values that would have left me kind of stranded and trying to figure out through experimentation otherwise.
And I believe, that's why you are the man that you are now. And you have all, again, the freedom to pick and choose the best of all that you've learned, the best of all, that you're exposed to.
Mm.
And luckily, this is the only society where you can have the freedom to pick and choose. Many cultures don't allow you to pick and choose.
Yeah. All right. So recapping, we saw your first job here. We saw your entrepreneurial pursuit. Now we see your parenting life and your growth towards stability. At some point, 15, 20 years outside of Pakistan. How has this impacted like your thoughts on Pakistan? Are you feeling homesick? Was there ever a point where you thought, I left something behind there and I want it back?
I left Lahore back.
Yeah.
I miss Lahore more than I miss Pakistan.
Yeah.
That's I think that's a city, that's a culture, and it's a beautiful thing. That's why there is a difference between patriotism and nationalism. I'm patriotic. I'm patriotic to my place of birth. I'm patriotic towards my place where my children were born, where they were raised. So my patriotism is not limited to any one place. And you can love both. You can love both places.
Mhm.
But like I said, it's not a zero-sum game that you must leave one in order to love the other. And I hope, that never in my life I would have to choose between Lahore and New Jersey.
Yeah, I think we were enabled the luxury these days of just getting, an annual or biannual taste of Lahore, and
There we
then
go.
back to our.
And luckily now we have the opportunity to at least taste a lot of Lahori food, not to the level of the Lahore flavor and Lahore taste exactly.
Yeah.
Nostalgia,
Yeah.
and that we can still enjoy that nostalgia right here in New Jersey, Oak Tree Road.
Oh, there's tons of amazing Pakistani food around here, but you go to Pakistan and it just feels like wisps compared to.
Exactly. That's an entirely different.
Beautiful.
So,
All right.
I think that's it. That's probably caps my journey. There will be many more stories I'll share over the next couple of episodes. But for now, I think that's all that I have to share at this point.
Lovely. It was amazing hearing your journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful time.